Hey, what's up everybody? RatX here, the one from 72, the ultra neutral, bringing you 12 minutes of why you should hate the reptilians, or reptoids, which we're going to get into that too, versus the humans on this planet who occupy the crust of the planet versus the reptoids who live inside of the planet. Obviously, I said this before, you're safer in a planet than you are on a planet. However, in the upcoming war, I will not be taking sides. When I say that I'm ultra neutral, I truly mean I'm ultra neutral. Although you would think I would be a traitor to the human race to not choose the side of the human race, but however, through time and time again throughout history, as a human, as humans know, we have always been told lies of why wars began.
On August 7, 1964, they passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting the president unprecedented military powers.
Our government is united in its determination to take all necessary measures in support of freedom and in defense of peace in Southeast Asia.
U.S. troops endured more than a decade of fierce combat that eventually brought the legality of the resolution into question.
A lot of documents have been made public since the war, and it appears that perhaps there really wasn't an attack, or if there was an attack, it was sort of freelance by the gunboat commanders.
Congress ultimately repealed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in 1971, but it is remembered today for igniting one of our nation's most contentious wars.
We've stopped looking, they're not there.
No.
It? How did that happen?
It just kind of was, it evolved. The fact that there wasn't weapons evolved. I mean, when we first got in there and started looking around and didn't find anything, you get that kind of sinking feeling that was a period at the end of the sentence there. And I felt terrible about it. And on the other hand, those reports did point out that Saddam Hussein was very dangerous, that he had the capacity to make weapons, and I'm convinced that if he were in power today, the world would be a lot worse off.
We are told by someone who was a witness that Saddam announced that Palestine is Arab, as one of his final words, long a champion of Arab causes, pan-Arab causes.
Propaganda, which are wars of humans versus humans. So the war between the humans versus the reptilians or reptoids, I'm sure that there is going to be a lot of misleading and a lot of lies that are going to lead up to the great reason why you should hate them and why you will fear them and want to see them eradicated. This is ingrained in who you are as a human, and I obviously will not be choosing a side in that war. Let's get started on the whole thing with why do I say reptoids? Well, because a reptoid is a reptilian humanoid. So that's actually the pronunciation of what we should be calling them. However, I have to dumb it down for the dummies and just continue to say reptilians because that's the only way that they'll understand or try to understand any of the things that I'm talking about. It's the same thing for me as calling Native Americans Indians.
Invader. He got lost coming here, and he's the one that named us Indians because he thought he was in India.
However, still to this day, people call them Indians. So that is the type of stuff that I'm talking about when I say about the propaganda and the lies and all that and building up the hatred and the fear. So if we go all the way back to Genesis in the Bible, right? That was where the fear very first began, of the fear of the reptile, right? The reptilian who comes to the Garden of Evil. Of course, the reptilian cannot taint the man. He has to use the woman to taint the man, and he has to go through her to get to the man, also demonizing the woman as well, saying that she was deceitful and that she followed along with this other villain in the very beginning of the story in Genesis. Even though we look at that is the story of the beginning of the earth, which we know now that the earth is 4.5 billion years old, and that the earliest biblical text was actually written 3,400 years ago. 1200 BC was when the very first biblical text was written, even though the oldest text in the world predates that writings, which was actually 2600 years BC. So for 1400 years before any biblical text was written, there was 1400 years of text that was actually written in the world, going back to 4.5 billion years ago. That's when the story supposedly takes place. You can do the math on that as well. And then if you look at how long human beings have been on this planet, well, we go back to only 300,000 years. That is not enough time for a being to evolve from an early primate 300,000 years to this point right now. In fact, which makes you believe that they, humans, are not from this planet, not from planet Earth, which means that humans would be considered an occupier of this planet, which is a good reason of why having a biblical text put in place to tell you that when you die, that you leave this planet behind because this planet belongs to evil and you should not be here. You want to go someplace better. Whereas the reptilians who are from this planet, who evolved on this planet, because you got to look at the fact that there are 56 million years of a Jurassic era to let beings evolve into highly intelligent, highly functional humanoid beings, which would be reptoids during a reptilian era. Of course, it's safer to go inside of the earth and underground to build your cities from inside of caves and inside the earth than it is on top of the crust of the earth. When you have bronciosauruses running around in herds, or when you have pterodactyls flying over top, or other big prehistoric birds who are just going to fly over and swoop up and take you off a scaffolding and just take off with you. As a highly functional species, of course, you'd have to go inside of the earth, away from the dangers on top of the crust of the earth. But if you have another species who's brought here from the stars from somewhere else, which would be humans, reptilians look very different from humans. So it's because they look different, because they look rough, because their manners and their customs are very, very different than the humans' manners and everything in the way that they look. Humans are predetermined to fear them, to hate them. This we have seen humans do to other humans. 400 or 500 years ago, when the settlers came here to America, the same thing happened. You had people that were here, that were natives, that were very weird, very different, and they didn't look the same as the Europeans. They weren't as what the Europeans would consider as their type of intelligence. They didn't do the type of customs and the things that they were into.
The U.S. has a long and brutal legacy of attempting to eradicate Native Americans. For centuries, they colonized Native American lands and murdered their populations. They forced them west and pushed them into small, confined patches of land. But Native Americans resisted. A Board of Indian Commissioners report said, instead of dying out under the light and contact of civilization, the Indian population is steadily increasing. And that was an obstacle to total American expansion. So the U.S. found a new solution to absorb and assimilate them.
The human species were brought as slaves from another planet to this planet to do what they're doing, and it's the same thing. They brought the African Americans to this country and did the same thing. They had to beat them down. They had to show them their dominance so that way they could finally, at some point in time, integrate them into their way of life, into their system, finally take the shackles and the chains off of them, finally tell them, force them to stop speaking African, their native language, and force them to start speaking English and to start following their religious ways and their doctrine and their way of life and their systems. And that is the only way that they would be accepted.
Originally, the Latin Niger just meant black.
Cock-a-doodle-doo, nigga.
What's your name?
My name is Toby.
Hi. That's a good nigger.
We have invented the nigger. I didn't invent him. White people invented him.
So yes, when the reptilians finally emerge, when they come up to fight for the crust of the planet, or when the humans start to go inward into the planet to the point to where it becomes a problem and the reptilians want to drive them out of the interior of the planet, then that war will begin. And of course, it's going to be the same thing as what you saw here, just in America alone, in just the past 400 years. You're going to hear a lot of people call them derogatory names, calling them lizards, calling them snakes, saying very nasty and mean things about them. Once they've captured them and they forced them into their way of life, just like they did the same thing with the Native Americans and the African, then as time goes on, then you'll start seeing later on, way off into the future, after most of you are dead and gone, you will see people who will come up and speak up for the remaining left of the reptilians that are there, and trying to say that, look, these are beings that are from this planet. They were here long before the humans were. We should respect them. They were just trying to protect the planet. And that is why you have to hate the reptilians, because it's the only way that you as a human, especially as an American, know how to do things, how to deal with something that you do not understand, and something that's very different, something's very strange to you. And like I said, their way of life, their customs and way to look is exactly what is going to be used to propagate the war, as well as this whole thing that's coming out where people are saying that the reptilians are running the country, that anyone that you deem as bad, if you're on one side, if you're on a Republican side, of course you're saying that the reptilians are all the Democrats who are running the country. And if you're on the Democratic side, of course you're saying all the Republicans, people over there are running the country, are reptilians. You hear it all the time. People are saying that, you can look it up. They say George Bush is a reptilian, and then they say Barack Obama is a reptilian. So how can you vote for either side when you're saying that one on one side is reptilian, one's on the other side? Maybe it could be propaganda and lies. Let that sink in and think about that before you join the war, before you join the wrong side. Become ultra neutral. It's the only way to move forward as a human species, because once this war begins, the Anunnaki will return to help tip the balance in the humans' favor, where the humans will be able to win the war over the reptilians. But all of that won't mean anything and when the Draconians arrive on this planet, because then the ultra neutral are the only people who are going to be able to survive what is coming.